folks, welcome to this week's review, which might turn out to be a trilogy of sorts, a trilogy based on a UK company called Soundeck. Soundeck are an interesting company, and I will go into their background in a second. What they deal with, what they deal in hi-fi terms, are ancillaries, accessories. But for this video, we're looking at a Soundeck Platter Mat. It's actually called the Soundeck PM Platter Mat, and it can be used to upgrade your current default platter mat, the mat that may have been supplied with your turntable when you bought it. It's designed to upgrade that particular item. Before I get into this, if you look into the description below, I've got a whole host of chapter headings, so if you want to skip to any particular section, or if you want to bounce around this video, you're welcome to do that by clicking on the chapter headings below. When a turntable is made, the platter mat is often the last thing a manufacturer looks at when they're considering their build budget. There's all kinds of important elements on the turntable: the platter itself, the plinth, tone arm, even the cartridge. But the actual platter mat that sits on the platter itself, well, it's often looked at as an afterthought. It's the least important thing on the list, especially if a company is trying to hit a particular retail price point. If you have a manufacturer and they want to push out a turntable at, say, £399, then it gets to a point where they're really counting the pennies to achieve that particular price point, and they don't want any expensive accessories which may push them over that price point. If you're looking for an accessory to enhance sound quality, and a good quality platter mat can enhance sound quality, if you're looking for that, well, the job is yours. It's down to you to pay the extra cash to bring one in. Now look, I mentioned improved sound quality, but look, really, is there actually any point in upgrading a platter mat? Why spend the money in the first place? Why? Well, because your turntable's platter and the actual record itself is full of noise and vibration. It's put there by the movement and the motion of your turntable, and also, specifically, that little piece of diamond careering and banging around the groove of your record. Look, vibration is not necessarily a bad thing where turntables are concerned. It's fine and useful, actually, if it's treated properly. If you encourage vibration to peter out and drain away to zero, then everything is fine. And vibration also has a practical use in terms of listening to music, because it holds information. For example, the reverb stroke echo effects in music. Well, vibration has a part to play in transferring that information to your ear. Hence, some vibration is good, but as ever with the world, balance is what we look for. Extremes, well, that causes issues. Too much vibration is going to trigger high frequency noise, and that's a bad thing for sound quality overall, for your turntable and the rest of your hi-fi. So, like every other part of your turntable, it's a balancing act. Get that balance right and you're onto a winner. Get it wrong and the turntable will either sound dull or, on the opposite scale, too bright. It's a bit like wanting to damp your listening room. You want to damp it just enough to remove damaging echoes and harmful bouncing frequencies, dead spaces and the like. But too much kills the sound dead and your room suddenly sounds like a padded cell. So once again, balance is what you're aiming for. A platter mat is just another tool in the hi-fi armory. It's another part of that engineering team that we call the turntable. There are a host of platter mats currently being sold on the market, made from different materials and sold at different prices. Most of them will affect the sound in different ways because of the nature of their construction or because of the inherent material they're made from. I'll be looking at a few of those in this review. But what of this particular platter mat? What of Soundeck? Just who is Soundeck? Well, Soundeck is part of a larger company, and that larger company is called Sound Damped Steel. They are based in Newcastle and they're run by a chap named Les Thompson, who happens to be a hi-fi enthusiast on the side. Now, it just so happens that his umbrella company, the main company, well, that deals in heavy industry, and within heavy industry, their role in life is to reduce noise. And yes, that's the core customer for this company as a whole, heavy industry. As I say, hi-fi is but a wing of the main business here, but it's an effective business nevertheless. As you can tell by the name, it uses damped steel and other damped materials to reduce noise in a host of associated heavy industries. That means producing acoustic enclosures, dampers, absorbent panels, and many other products. So Sound Damped Steel, well, their customers are power stations, their customers are underground railway networks, and even gas pipelines. And as an aside, I bet you didn't know that gas pipelines could be noisy. I didn't. I thought gas sort of serenely floated through a pipe, but it doesn't. According to the owner, Les Thompson, it screams. In fact, here's a little bit of footage of a gas pipeline in action before our Les has gotten to damp it down in terms of noise. If you're wearing headphones, I would advise you to lower the volume a tad. You done that? Okay, let's roll them. So, Sound Damped Steel, or SDS, if I can shorten the name, would quieten that lot down. That would be their job on that pipeline, especially if those pipes were running past a housing area. So Soundeck, as I say, is an offshoot, a wing of that same company, also overseen by Les Thompson. And they handle isolation feet for hi-fi. They have stabilizers to put on top of the turntable spindle. They have setup tools to fit your arm and cartridge. They're quite heavily into the accessory side, and they also have a platter mat. Let me show you. And here it is. It's actually quite stiff and it's 4mm thick. So you may need to adjust the height of your tone arm in use, but that obviously depends on your current setup and the thickness of the last mat you used. Of course, it depends on your turntable. The basic makeup of this particular mat is, well, it's a 3-layer design. The top and the bottom layer is aluminium based. Then in the middle is a 65 microns thick polymer layer of damped material. So what you've got in effect is a constrained layer damping effect. Now, yes, this is aluminium, and so what's this black material? Well, this is a powder coating, and it's, well, sufficiently smooth, I would say, not to cause concern when placing your delicate vinyl on top. It's not going to scratch the vinyl, but there's enough sort of bite in there to stop any vinyl slipping. In the center is a little logo. Let me bring that to camera. Hopefully you can see that properly. And in addition, there's a couple of little quirky cutouts. Let me show you that. Hopefully you can see that little cutout. It's quite a little cute addition to this mat, but it actually also has a practical use in terms of the design and the construction of this mat. And we'll get to this little quaver notation add-on a little bit later on. And there are 3 of these circling around the mat as a whole. Now, even though you've had a close look at the platter mat, I would still like to do a closer look section. So I have a slightly different closer look section for you this time around. SDS was kind enough to produce a little video about how this thing has been made, and I would like to thank Les Thompson for taking the time and the trouble to do this. I'm going to be adding a little bit of commentary to the video itself. So yes, let's take a closer look. Welcome to the closer look section for the Soundeck PM Platter Mat, and in front of you you can see a pile of sheets. This is the raw material before the actual round platter is formed. These are the constrained aluminium and polymer layers. One of these sheets is clamped into the CNC machine for processing. Just so you can see what's going on here, SDS kindly prepared a dry run just for me, just so you can see the initial cutting of the hole for the center spindle. Normally there's liters of coolant being sprayed all over the place, so it's really tough to see what's going on. Next, the machine grinds the recess for the record label area of the vinyl. After that, there's a change in cutting tool. What you'll see now are those little musical note patterns being cut into the mat itself. As you'll see later on, they're used as a convenient method of support during the powder coating process. And here's that coolant I mentioned in action during the cutting process. To cut the circular shape from the square master, the cutter initiates 4 passes to cut through slowly but surely, 1 millimeter at a time. This is partly a safety thing, because if the cutter blundered its way through the entire thing in one fell swoop, you'd have whopping great pieces of dangerous aluminium flying around the factory. This is why, even after the cutting, there's a secure yet very thin piece of foil left by the cutter, which allows for manual final trimming, and you'll see that in a moment. Once the cutting machinery has done its job, then any excess coolant and oil is removed from the disc. This is the point that the remaining foil that connects the disc to the waste material is cut and separated. Now this chap who's grinding the edges is, so I'm told, very experienced at his job. Gotta say, I did worry about this guy not using gloves because, well, I was a bit concerned on his behalf about possible splinters, but I was told that the obvious splinters were removed prior to grinding. The disc is then sent off to another company to be powder coated in textured black. The items ready for coating are first hung and then fed into this machine to give them an overall clean, removing any grease and other grime. These smaller items that you can see here are actually Soundeck's isolation feet, which are also being coated at the same time. But I might talk about those in a future video, a part 2. Here you can see the discs hung from those little notation shapes we saw earlier on. This poor chap then manually coats the discs. So why isn't a robot doing this job? Well, if you're a large car manufacturer, say like, well, I don't know, someone like Nissan, then you can afford expensive robots to do this job. Sure, small to medium companies cannot afford them. More to the point though, robots are programmed to spray the same shape over and over. This company can spray any shape and any size, so humans do offer a certain amount of flexibility. Yay humans. Once dried, the platter mats are ready for the logos to be applied. Now I couldn't get a video sequence for this bit, but here's the before and the after series of images for you all to see. Once completed, you're ready to roll. So that's how the Soundeck PM Platter Mat is actually made, but how does it sound? Well, let's go to the sound quality tests and we'll find out. And welcome back to the sound quality tests for the Soundeck PM Platter Mat. And once again, thanks to Les Thompson for sorting that video for me. It's very nice of you, Les, thank you. To begin these sound tests, I grabbed a copy of the album from Bruce Hornsby and the Range, and the title track from the RCA release, The Way It Is. Now that's dominated by that large resonant piano, but there's also percussion there, synth lines, electric guitar and more, apart from the notable vocal of course. I started the actual sound tests by comparing the Soundeck with another mat. I chose a relatively cheap mat, a felt mat, just a very thin felt mat, which you can buy new for £10–12 or so. This is the sort of thing you might find on a Riga turntable, for example. Now I must say that felt mats are highly recommended if you have next to no cash and, for example, you might be using one of those horrible rubber mats which I often find on budget Japanese turntables. I don't rate them at all. Incidentally, a felt mat will outperform it every day of the week. The felt mat will produce a more open and airy sound in comparison to one of those horrible rubber mats. But on that basis, I compared the felt mat to the Soundeck. Now, comparing the Soundeck mat directly with the felt mat, well, the felt mat sounded a bit like releasing a classroom of 5-year-olds into a field and giving them a ball to play with. That is, you heard a sense of freedom and joy, but also complete chaos. What the Soundeck brings to the soundstage in comparison to the felt mat is a real sense of control. This is important to instruments like the piano, which are really a mess of frequencies at the best of times. This resonance box is, well, it's all over the place as a default. The Soundeck gives more form to the piano, more structure, a greater sense of discipline, if you will. Yes, there is a slight accentuation around the upper mids and treble, which does hone the details in that region. The piano had a clean and crisp sound, while bass displayed extra focus and precision. Bottom line, I preferred the sound from the Soundeck. Now, that's not unusual. We're talking about a £90 platter mat compared to a £10 to £12 platter mat. But even so, it's good to get that sonic confirmation. So what was next? Well, I chose my reference leather mat. A leather mat is a heavier overall proposition, and it's heavier in price as well, priced around £20, I would say. Now, I found the leather mat damped the sound. Well, it kept on damping the sound really, and didn't really stop for a while, in that it produced a slightly warming presentation. So the mid-range was very pleasant, but it lost a little bit of focus and precision, I would say. In comparison, the Soundeck sounded faster paced, more exacting in its presentation. Also, the Soundeck sounded more accurate in terms of the piano and the lead guitar. Percussion was rather cuddly and approachable using the leather mat, but at the same time it lacked a sense of impact. It no longer provided a certain punctuation to the song. Instead, it sort of strolled alongside. I then changed the mat and I tried a platter mat made out of cork. Again, you're looking around £20, maybe a couple of pounds less perhaps. And the sound proved to be wonderfully neutral and balanced during play. The music behaved itself. There was no sense of barking mids or blooming bass here. On that level, the cork mat matched the Soundeck blow for blow. The only issue I had with the cork mat when compared to the Soundeck mat was that the cork mat went so far in terms of extracting detail and opening up the soundstage. Now, again, I do like the cork mat. Very nice indeed. Highly recommend it for the price. But compared to the Soundeck, well, the cork mat extracted detail, it kept on extracting detail, and then it stopped. The Soundeck mat kept on going. So where the bass from the cork mat produced a sense of focus, the Soundeck continued the trend, adding a more organic structure. When the cork mat infused the soundstage with space, the Soundeck mat added more air into that same area. So, as well as the cork mat performed, and it did perform well, it couldn't really match the performance of the Soundeck mat. So I tried to up the ante a little bit more, and I looked at a platter mat from Origin Live. The materials included in the platter mat from Origin Live is a bit of a secret, I suppose. It's the Origin Live's own recipe, and it comes from their own cookbook. Price for the Origin Live, I think it's around 40, 43, 45, something like that. So it would offer a more severe test for the Soundeck, I think. The Origin Live builds around the basic friendly sound of the cork mat, but extends the frequency exploration, adding more detail, more information, a greater sense of frequency balance, and a rich flavour to the music that gives it a more expensive feeling. So the Soundeck was up against it here. And frankly, if you enjoy a laid back, at ease sense of music making, then the Origin Live is the mat to go for. But if you want more focus, more precision, and a greater sense of position in the instruments and how they're laid out on the soundstage, then you want to go for the Soundeck. Of course, you're paying for the privilege, but there are improvements there. Some users might see the Soundeck as offering a tad too much focus, perhaps slightly etched in the upper mids maybe, but there's really nothing untoward here, nothing of any great note to be concerned about, methinks. The signature is more to do with personal preference. What the Soundeck offers here is a greater sense of tonal realism. The piano, for example, really does sound like a box stuffed full of metal bits. So when those hammers hit those piano strings, there's a real metallic ring going on here. That's both sprightly and reactive. The Soundeck manages to track the instantaneous, sharp aspect of the hammer strikes on those piano strings, while maintaining an open reverb tail after the strike has occurred. For my final test, I actually selected a platter mat that was more expensive than the Soundeck. This is a mat from Hexmat. It's called the Yellowbird. Now the Hexmat is priced at around, well, in euros anyway, about 140 euros. That comes out at about just under 120 pounds. And well, as seems to have appeared throughout these comparative tests, the performance follows price in that the Hexmat was the winner here. The Soundeck couldn't cope with the Hexmat's extended dynamic reach. The piano on the Hexmat sounded larger, the sound from it was more complex, vocals had a fuller timbre, synths had greater depths, and so on. So in this case, performance followed price. So let's put all of that into some sort of perspective, shall we? And let's try and find a conclusion for the Soundeck PM Platter Mat. This particular platter mat follows its price point in terms of relative performance. That is, at £90 or £75 for export, the Soundeck PM sounds better than those cheaper mats, so it fits nicely in terms of price performance. The Soundeck PM Platter Mat produces a fast-paced, lively, nimble and accurate performance, and it will enhance the performance of any turntable that it's matched with. I highly recommend it. And that's it, folks. Thanks very much for sticking with me to the end of this video. If I could ask you to click on the like and subscribe buttons below, will help this channel to keep on growing. YouTube loves all that kind of stuff. Check out below in the description for those chapter headings I mentioned. Also a host of social media links, the link to my website, which has all kinds of extra editorial you won't see on this channel. If you'd like to support me on Patreon, I'm on Patreon, and there are exclusive videos and editorial on there too. And I will be back next week with another video, maybe part 2 of Soundeck. Who knows? I'm not too sure at this moment. We'll see. If you want to keep in touch with me on the community tab just below this video somewhere, then hopefully I'll be able to tell you early next week what's going on. Until that time, folks, because I'd like to have your company, so hopefully you can join me then. Until that time, bye bye for now.